So, hey guys, listen, we're all trying to get more productive. And the question is, how do you find a way to get an edge? I'm a big believer that if you're getting mentoring or you're in an environment that causes growth, a growth-based environment, that you're much more likely to grow and you're going to grow faster. And that's why I love Growth Day. Growth Day is an app that my friend Brendan Burchard has created that I'm a big fan of. Write this down, growthday.com/ed. So if you want to be more productive, by the way, he's asked me, I post videos in there every single Monday that get your day off to the right start. He's got about $5,000, $10,000 worth of courses that are in there that come with the app. Also, some of the top influencers in the world are all posting content in there on a regular basis, like having the Avengers of personal development and business in one app. And I'm honored that he asked me to be a part of it as well and contribute on a weekly basis, and I do. So go over there and get signed up. You're going to get a free, tuition-free voucher to go to an event with Brendan and myself and a bunch of other influencers as well. So you get a free event out of it also. So go to growthday.com/ed. That's growthday.com/ed. Goals without standards are empty. What I really focus on is what my standards are that can help deliver on the goals that I have. So the goal creates the energy, the standard creates the delivery mechanism.
But while the past is real, it's not predictive. What you do next is what determines your future, not how you feel.
Don't let somebody else label you or tell you what you can't do, or you're not strong enough, big enough, talented enough. Listen, they're underestimating you.
The price you will pay, the suffering you will go through to make your dream come true is incredibly small than the price you will pay if you never do.
You mentioned something called becoming an impossibility thinker and a possibility achiever.
Yep.
And so many people that I see are self-sabotaging because they're not viewing it through that lens. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm typing this great note down. Here's the thing. Here's the governor that you put on yourself if you're someone who is not an impossibility thinker. Being an impossibility thinker is really simple. It's being willing to envision things you're ill prepared to do. Yeah. See, the people that I know that I think have achieved this level of success, they have a lower threshold for what they need to know about something in order to imagine it and believe it's possible. So unsuccessful people have a very high threshold of what they have to know or what they have to have everything in place. And so they won't step into the unknown. I used to coach a race car driver. I won't say his name because I had an NDA with it, but a very successful NASCAR driver. And he told me, he goes, Ed, the most difficult thing in racing is not the normal race. It's when there's a crash in front of you. And when there's this crash in front of you, he goes, I want you to imagine you're going 180 to 200 miles an hour, and all there is a cloud of smoke. That's all you see. And you have to drive into that cloud of smoke, not knowing that on the other side, there may be a stalled car that you're going to hit head on and kill yourself. And he said, it's your ability to drive through that fog, drive through that unknown, drive through that smoke that separates you from other drivers. What most guys do is they start looking at the wall and they veer towards it. And he said, my ability to drive through that crash smoke, even though I don't know what's on the other side of it, is what separates me from other guys. And man, that's so true in business and life too. Successful people are willing to drive through the smoke, not knowing what's on the other side, but believing I'll be resilient enough when I get in the room to figure it out. Yeah. Unsuccessful people, or people who are not successful yet, I'll drive once I know. I'll go once the conditions, once my kids are growing, once I have this much, once I read one more book, once I do one more, once I get, and the threshold keeps getting higher and higher and higher, and they never take action. That's a big separator. In order to achieve the impossible, you have to be willing to imagine it and actually allow your brain to go there, knowing you don't have all the information. I have a podcast. It's probably the most successful business podcast, weekly podcast on the planet, entrepreneurship. Man, I started out, I didn't even know how to order the microphone. The first one I did, I didn't record it. I forgot to record it, right? Like my son was the editor. He was 16, but I was willing to get into the space not knowing everything. I didn't know who the guest was going to be. Man, I didn't even know how you posted it once you recorded it. I remember Tony Robbins was like, hey, man, you put that thing on the chip? I'm like, chip? He goes, in the recording device, dude, you have to have a microchip in there to record the show. And I'm like, shit, I didn't know that. I thought you just pressed record. He goes, what did you think you were recording it on? I'm like, the machine.
Oh, my gosh.
So what if I would have thought about all I didn't know? I wouldn't have the #1 show in the world. Yeah. So you got to start to drive through the smoke.
Yeah, no, gosh, that's so good. I was just thinking too, one of the things that you mentioned in the book is that goals are energy. I've never heard somebody actually phrase it that way. Yeah. There's lots of things on goal setting, make SMART goals. Let's do this. But then you said goals are energy. And I got to thinking about it. I'm like, anything that I intentionally went after with my full heart, with my full self, always manifested in some way, shape, or form. May not look like exactly like I thought it was going to look.
Or when you thought it would happen either.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Talk to me about goals and energy, because I had never heard someone actually say it that way before.
Well, goal is a thought. And a thought creates a space that didn't exist before you have it. And I'm not going to get really quantum on you, but it actually creates an energy field that didn't exist before you had it. So when you have a goal, it creates an energy around it. That goal now has a vibrational frequency. And the more you feed it and the more it vibrates faster, and you start to feed it and feed it and feed it, its energy level can get up to a point where it achieves itself.
Yeah.
And most people don't look at it that way, but that's exactly how it is. I'm a Christian. You are as well. But I also believe there's an energy field that just the Almighty created.
Yep.
And so I believe goals have energy to them. Now, having said that, I don't think you get all your goals. And I say it in the book. I think you always get your standards, though. And that's why the next chapter is on standards. Goals without standards are empty. What I really focus on is what my standards are that can help deliver on the goals that I have. So the goal creates the energy. The standard creates the delivery mechanism.
Jeez. Can I be transparent with you about something?
Please.
So as a Christian, I've been on the fence for probably 24 months, right? Because I'm meaning not with my faith, but with elements of how quantum and energy and stuff relate to my faith. I discovered Dispenza's work, a couple of years ago, probably when everybody else really started to, and I started to kind of go through some of his work. And it wasn't until you at Max Out Live where you actually stood up in front of everybody and said, look, I believe in Jesus, but I also believe in energy. And I believe this resonance and this vibration is real, that I actually felt okay.
Yeah.
Because I've been carrying that with me for so long, not sure. Because, you go to a traditional pastor kind of scenario and not everybody kind of gets it. Yep. And then if you go too far new age, and then you kind of start losing a little bit of your faith. I've been walking this tightrope forever. Dude.
Me too, brother. The new age is like your God, and I don't buy that at all. Yeah, I know me really well. By the way, no one's ever said that to me before, ever. And I have too. In fact, the chapter I wrote on faith and energy took longer than the rest of the book combined. And I really struggle with it because I wanted to honor my faith at the same time, be honest about it. Listen, this interview is going well. Why? There's an energy frequency happening here. Yeah. You always know when you're in a space. God gave you this energy. God gave you discernment. Discernment is energy. Talks about it in the Bible. Doesn't call it energy, calls it discernment. But what discernment is you're sensing energy. Discernment tells you this person, you ever meet somebody, you're like, nah, I don't feel it.
Absolutely.
Right. What's that come from? That's discernment, which is energy. So you're already proving that there's an energy field. Or you've been other people like, man, I can't explain it. Man, I like this dude. I like her. Right. There's an energy frequency. So to deny that is ridiculous. Also, highest energy wins. People that make us feel good. Yeah. What is a feeling? It's an energy. Right. It's an energy. So everything is energy. We're always feeling energy. Highest energy wins. I'm trying to transfer energy when I speak. So to deny its existence is insane. In fact, take churches. A good church that's on fire for the body of Christ has an energy that's infectious and people are excited. Why do you want to bring people to church? Because the energy, the feeling, right? We do something special here. So actually, I think great pastors understand energy. And I will say this to you. I struggle with it as well because I as a devout man of God, as a Christian, I always worry I'm sounding new agey.
Me too.
Right. When I'm like, you can tap into this field. And so I always am reluctant, but I've come to the conclusion that all of the beautiful things in life that have served me have come from the Almighty, have come from God.
Yep.
And I know energy exists.
Yeah.
I think success has an energy. I think failure has an energy. I think slumps have an energy. We all know this. As I say it, you're all nodding. So to deny its existence is crazy. Having said all of that, I believe that energy is spirit.
Yeah.
And when I speak, people go, man, when you speak, sometimes I'm like, hey, man, that's not always me. That's the Holy Spirit. And I'm not sure how to put it all together quite yet, but I'm not so sure that the Holy Spirit doesn't have something to do with energy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think we'll, guys like you and I that talk openly about this stuff, maybe we'll find better ways to phrase it.
Yeah.
But we certainly feel it. We certainly know it. And I don't believe the fact that you buy into energy discounts the fact that you have a Lord and Savior. Yeah. And I think the notion of it's crazy. Does that mean you're not going to get criticism for people that think any word like that's blasphemous? Yeah, but I've just decided that's okay. I'm not religious. I have a relationship with God. It's my relationship with Jesus, right? Yep. And sometimes it's roaring and doing great. And sometimes I'm like, Lord, why are you doing this? Yeah. Why are you? My dad died. What's going on here? I was at Chalk Hospital this week with kids that are, one of the little boys has leukemia. You don't think for a minute, I went, Lord, come on, man.
Yeah.
Let's get this, but I understand there's a higher purpose. I understand there's a calling. I understand there's an energy to it. So, man, I really appreciate you're transparent about that. It's probably the most difficult thing I've struggled with in my life too. Will you tell them this SAT story for a minute with the guy with the 1400? Because I think facts tell, stories sell. So of all your content, when I've devoured it, some of the stories are what make points for me, right? And so please share this story and then make the point that you would make with it for them. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I think for me, truthfully, just even as a high school teacher, like cutting my teeth in LA Unified School District and then being raised by my dad, like my dad had thousands of articles of these anecdotal stories, and even to wrap up the negative one, he had a great story about a guy that locked himself on accident in a refrigerated boxcar, starts panicking, because he can't get the attention of anybody else in the boxcar, starts writing down what's going through his mind. Like, I'm in this boxcar, I'm going to freeze to, half asleep now, I can hardly write. And then the guy writes, these may be my last words. It's from Success Unlimited, a magazine in 73. They open up the boxcar many hours later, they find the guy and he's dead. But then they check the freezing apparatus. It was 56 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
They found out that the freezing apparatus was broken. There was no physical reason for his death. All they could say, as they tried to diagnose it, was somehow he talked himself into dying. Like, this is not a gimmick. Now, it may have taken cancer for me to appreciate it, but I hope it doesn't take people that. And it shouldn't. I'm so embarrassed it took that for me because my dad, like the coach that he was, the teacher he was, the motivator was, the millions of people that that he inspired. And I love my dad and we were close. I just was like, no, I don't buy this. But the SAT in the 80s was scored out of two parts, a math part and a verbal part, both scored out 800 points. Well, people who are not successful, people who are not achieving, people who are about to get kicked out of school, people who are, substance abuse are typically not expected to do well. Doesn't mean they can't, but they're not expected to do well. But he promises mom he'd take it. So he takes it in May and then he gets a score back in June and he scores a 1480 out of 1600 as my dad shares the story. So, so like obviously for people that want a much bigger IQ than I have, and you've been pissed off that you haven't got big words yet in this podcast, it would be called cognitive dissonance, right? Where like what you believe to be true versus what happened are different.
Right.
So
context, Trevor, I got a 870 on my SATs and you got a 1010, I think, right? So
I got a 1010. Yeah. So
this dude's blown up the score. It's almost 1500. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So, as ultimately he, so he's confounded. His mother confronted him, did what any mom would do. She said, like, did you cheat? Right. She knows her son. He said he tried to cheat, but the Scantrons were, the way the seats were, the number 2 pencil. Right. So, he took the test. So going back into his senior year, he says, man, if I'm smart, I might as well go to class. So he makes a decision based on that score that he'll go to class. Well, that decision, because he starts going to class, he doesn't hang out with people he used to when he didn't go to class. Well, now teachers see him and they start to treat him differently. Maybe they missed the boat on him. He's in class. He's learning more. Graduates, goes to a community college, goes to a 4-year, and then goes on to the Ivy League, gets an MBA. Well, ultimately changes his life, becomes this incredible magazine entrepreneur. So I'm young. I hear the story. And my dad was telling me all sorts of stories. Man, growing up, I'd be listening to Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and every great speaker you could imagine. So I'm hearing the story, and he said that the guy says, no, that's not the story. So 12 years after all this guy's success, he gets a letter in the mail from Princeton, New Jersey. Now, he don't think anything about it. So it turns out the next day his wife said, you're going to open it. He opens it. Well, it turns out the SAT board, which they do every year, will do a standard review of their test-taking procedures and policies. The year he took the test, according to my dad, he's one of 13 people, sent the wrong SAT score. His actual score was a 740 out of 1600. Oh, gosh. And as I heard it, I'm stunned. Wow. And so the guy says, people think the 1480 is what changed my life. But what in truth really changed my life is when I started acting like a 1480. Wow. And what does a 1480 do? He goes to class. Wow. And like what the sports world will tell you is, they're Cam Newtons that look like GoBots and Transformers and LeBron James, but how do you explain a Russell Wilson? Mm-hmm. And yes, there are Mike Trouts, but how do you explain a Craig Biggio?
Right.
You know, and I mean, so there's so many like different, and in the business world, of course, there are people that went to Harvard. Of course, there are the Mark Zuckerbergs and all the different people. But how do you explain the thousands of people that didn't go through any traditional education and yet are running our world?
Bro, it's one of the all-time great stories. And there's a couple more maybe we'll get to towards the very end because we're turning the corner on this. But that behavior piece is huge. So far, guys, we're piecing this together. It's don't say stupid things. Try not to think them, and don't say stupid things out loud, number one. Two, your behavior is a predictor of your future. And sometimes behavior can influence thinking, right? Third, a huge piece that you teach. And by the way, I wish I knew this earlier, honestly. With a lot of the UFC guys that I've worked with, I wish I had this terminology that I am now going to steal from you, just so you know. So when you hear me,
good. Please.
It's mine. But, and that is the concept of neutral thinking. Mm-hmm. Everyone listen close, because this is something all of you can get to relatively quickly as well, is neutral thinking. What does that mean and how do you do it?
So in 2009, probably through 2014, I was studying non-negativity, and the best information I could find out about non-negativity was children's books, and the elimination of negativity. And there was Taoism and some other things. But after my last season at Alabama, Kirby Smart, who's the same age as me, got the head coach of Georgia. So it'd be like being at Google and going to another company that's not quite Google, but getting a chance to be the CEO, and then me leaving Google with a good job to go to him. And I told him, I said, hey, I want to teach it a little bit different, and I want to call some things a little bit different than we've done in the past. Are you cool with that? Mm-hmm. He said, yeah. And so we really started forming at that point this idea of, well, negative thinking works negative, and positive thinking, it struggles. So let's think of it as a car. If I'm going backwards, I can't go to forwards all at once. I got to go to the middle, and that middle ground is neutral. So the idea of being neutral is ultimately the acceptance of the past as real. And that's where positive thinkers and positive coaches fuck everybody up. And because they want you to pretend that an outcome that you are currently facing or have faced recently, or you haven't been able to get through, if it's a bad one, but let's be honest, the bad ones are lasting a lot longer in your mind than the good ones. That just sucks. That's how we're wired. It's just the truth. So they want you, like, I went through a divorce. I talked about it in the book. That was like not my choice. I still love her. She's amazing. We're great friends. But there was a lot of people that said, think of all the people now you get to meet. Well, like, fuck, I got married to not meet anybody. I mean, you had your high school sweetheart. I mean, different people have different things, but like, different people have, I met mine, like love at first sight, airport, all these different things. Well, now it's over. So I had to approach it like, this is real. But I also knew that if I lingered and talked a lot about it, that the negativity would bleed into my future behaviors. So the idea of neutral is, we played a bad half. We had a really bad quarter. We're facing some serious shit right now in our world. I just lost the love of my life. I'm facing this health challenge. I'm just not performing as well as I want. Whatever it is, that's real. Mm-hmm. But while the past is real, it's not predictive. What you do next is what determines your future, not how you feel.
Guys, what he's saying, I just want to jump in, is when you got a corner who runs a 4.6 40 and he's covering a dude who runs a 4.3, and you keep telling that dude you can run with this guy, he knows he can't. Right? So there's got to be a neutral thinking and a behavior adjustment. I want to make sure they understand.
Right. Yeah, like we film everything, so there's no bullshit.
It doesn't lie.
There's no bullshit, and we got a scoreboard.
Can you give me an example of a neutral statement?
I'll give you just a great one from Apollo 13. So you're 205,000 miles away from Earth, and your secondary ship that's going to land on the moon, or one of them, explodes. So a lot of things are difficult to be positive about at that point. But negative thinking isn't going to work either. So the positive thing might be for Jim, Level to tell Buzz Aldrin and Fred Hayes, hey man, just stay with me. We're going to get home. We are finding a way to get home. We are going to get there. And basically what his thing is, all right, what just happened? We had a main bus valve break. Can we still land on the moon? So can we still land on the moon is the ultimate neutral statement. It's not positive. It's not negative. Can we land? No. All right. Okay. We can't land. Can we still, do these two scenarios? No. Can we still orbit the Earth or orbit the moon in this thing? No. All right. So this is our reality. This ship's not going to work. Can we get to the limb, orbit, and circle back? Yes. How would we do that? Okay, we get there. It doesn't have enough oxygen for all of us. So we're going to have a carbon monoxide issue. And every step, and anybody can go on YouTube and watch the Apollo 13 press conference. It's 1 hour and 26 minutes. It's available for everybody, the real one. And the whole thing is, this is how we did it. And then ultimately what he said is, we just had to find a way to keep going. And so, but I think a neutral statement is through adversity. I take setbacks as temporary. I bounce back quickly.
Very good.
Very good. And so, and hey, I got to support myself unconditionally.
Yes.
We're going to find a way through.
I want to go to the negative thinking thing just for a second. I teach a thing called thought stacking. When you begin to think negatively, it's a hyper fast thought stacking process you go through. So you magnify by thought stacking. It's almost impossible to contain one negative thought in your mind and then let it escape you. What you do is you begin to try to validate that thought with more negative thoughts and typically bigger ones. So that's why that's such a detrimental process to your productivity, your mental well-being, and overall your success. You stack thoughts, everybody. It's a huge thing for you to know. That's why you've got to identify them when they're there and stop the negative thinking process. And especially, as Trevor much more eloquently than I say, saying them out loud. The second thing is when you become a neutral thinker, okay, and that is a baseline place to get. It's not that I don't want you to aspire to be a positive thinking person. I do want you to do that. When you become a neutral thinker, you build some credit with yourself. Let me tell you what happens. When you neutrally think, like if you're in a UFC or you're one of my boxers and you're getting killed by a guy's left hook, neutral thinker says, hey, we got to address the left hook, right? We got to get our right hand up, or whatever that might be. That builds self-trust. If you're a positive thinker going, I don't eat left hooks, I don't eat left hooks, I don't eat left hooks, and the evidence keeps happening to the contrary, you deplete your own self-trust by being a positive thinker in a negative environment. So neutral thinking actually builds self-trust and self-confidence because what you're telling yourself, you're bearing to be true with evidence repetitively, so that when you do stack a positive thought, you've got some credibility with yourself. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's why neutral thinking is such a valuable asset.
That's one of the things in sports. Nobody cares why you didn't win.
Right.
It's just, you got to find a way to get it done. And so that's where I think sports are such, whether it's the UFC, whether it's, unique, different examples. And to your point about positive thinking, in the absence of negative thinking, positive thinking is a real weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have negative thoughts, what I want you to know is the best athletes in the world, and Ed, that whether it's the best athletes, best entrepreneurs, or best business people, everybody has them all the time.
Mm-hmm. Because
our wiring hasn't changed from 10,000 years ago, where if we weren't assuming the worst, we were going to get stepped on by a dinosaur.
Yes.
And that's the reality. So the book, It Takes What It Takes, with the foreword by Russell Wilson, is really, it proves the power of negativity. So if you're an asshole and you're watching this right now and you want to debate me, you can't not read that and walk away saying, you know what, bullshit, negative thinking is going to make me, or the externalization of negativity, not going neutral, like it's going to make me so much better. If you're succeeding and that's how you've been doing and you say a bunch of that stuff and you behaving, then you have succeeded in spite of yourself. people who become average because they do average people things. You know, I think people who become successful do successful people things, and people who struggle do struggle people things. And so what happens if I'm a struggle person and I keep doing that? Well, I know the outcome. I would rather aim high and miss than aim low and hit, and aiming low is not helping. You know, so focus more on the behavior. You know, that's why all these fitness plans don't work. Like, my dad used to talk about playing class reunions, and it'd be 25 years. He'd see all these people and they look great, you know, and then the class reunion would be in August, and he'd say, you know, I wonder if Ed hasn't eaten since June, you know, because you get back to your class and you want, but that's a short-term sell. You are only affecting your willpower, which will always lose to what you really believe. So after that event, you eat a little bit more, and then you start to go back to who you think you really are. And that's why the identity, which is, this is who I am based upon what I do. And where Ed said the neutral comment about athletes can't fake it to themselves, your confidence and your self-esteem is built on what you do, not magical words. And willpower, me coming to speak, a SEAL coming to speak, you know, David Scoggins telling you you're a fucking pussy, you know, or all those things, like, that's going to get, I want to change. But if you don't have a plan, then you're going to go back to who you know you are, not based upon who you're destined to be, but because you think you're a 740. Imagine if you were born, Ed, and you were like, you know what? Every time I've tried walking, all I do is eat it. So I'm just going to chill for a couple of years until I can do what those other people do and walk without any problems. And that's what I've had to learn in relationships. Like, I did all the Catholic things right. Yeah. But being a husband, so much more than that. I didn't do what needed to be done for the relationship to exist, and I'm paying the consequences. That does not indict me to not having something better going forward. And if I try and I meet somebody and she's not interested in me, that doesn't mean that I'm doomed for failure. It means that I've got to stay the course and execute the process. And that's what I've learned. And you know, I think the difference, what I've tried to do, and probably the hardest thing for me, Ed, I remember sitting down with Chris Pfaff, drama CEO, Young and Reckless, was like, you got to sell people on your badassness. And so I think it takes what it takes is an exploration of some of the best athletes, some of the best people, and an evolution of how we came to the idea of thinking neutrally, and the great people like Ed Mylett that I've been blessed to have my knowledge raised and get better, because the right attitudes are contagious. Attitudes are contagious in general. That's a neutral statement, bad or good. But the right attitude is a competitive advantage, and all an attitude is it's just a teeter-totter, man. It's a direction in which you lean. So your audience has got choices to make right now with some real realities that are no bullshit.
Yeah, Trevor, one of the separators for you is it's real life, real world experience, not theory. And that's why, guys, get the book. I'm just going to tell you straight up. And your vulnerabilities are what make you valuable, bro. If you were doing the Superman thing, I wouldn't connect with you because I'm screwed up too, right? Yep. So I like dudes that are screwed up, that are trying to be less screwed up to be great.
Yeah, I want to be less.
Yeah, me too. And you said something in there that was just, dude, there's so much gold in there, but you said something, I think I quote this correctly, where you said your willpower will eventually succumb to who you believe you are. And correct. That is powerful, man. Like, it will eventually succumb. Your willpower will. So
not even close. It's not even. It's not even close. It's why most New Year's affirmations, resolutions, or affirmations are gone by halftime of the Fiesta Bowl.
I want to know last thing, and we're pressed up on it, but that's just I want to know myself, because I've worked with different guys too, but you've worked with people I haven't worked with that I'm interested in them. So without being personal about them, what does Russell Wilson, Mike Trout, Nick Saban, let's just take those three. So different positions, and one's a coach, one's a quarterback, one's an outfielder. Okay. Those three guys, and you've worked with tons. What is different about them? Because there's something different about them that's different amongst the different ones. To get to those levels, everyone's different. Urban Meyer's a dear friend of mine. Lou Holtz has become a pretty good buddy. Like, there's something different about those few people that's different amongst the difference. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What do you think it is, or what do you know it is? Yeah,
well, it's interesting you mentioned, Lou Holtz, because you talk about somebody that doesn't have traditional aptitude. And I remember being 1997, finishing college in Pasadena, California. He came to speak. I was able to get my dad to pay $1,000 to go see him. Great. And one of the things that he would talk about, because there wasn't a lot of digital content available, was this idea that he didn't let members on his team quit. Once the season started, you had to play the whole season. You could quit at the end of the year, but like that was clear. And he said by doing that, players woke up every day not deciding if they wanted to be a part of the team. That was already decided, right? So that would help me. Where any job I take, I'm going to make a 2-year commitment. That's what my dad believes. So if I worked for a full-time company, my goal is to commit 2 years, because I need to know, obviously, unless they don't commit to me, but I need to have a better understanding of who they are and what they're about. So when I, went to Exos, I was there 2 years to the day. When I went to IMG, I was there, 12 years. But that 2-year commitment, when I went to teach, I taught 2 years at the first school, 2 years at the second year. So that was from Lou Holtz. But this is what I would say, and I know as we close, why is Nick Saban, this guy who worked at his dad's gas station from, Monaga, West Virginia, one of Forbes' best leaders in the world. And I know so many people like, why should a football coach be one of the best leaders in the world? We don't get to decide those things. Other people make those decisions. But his message is universal. And if you don't believe it, you see who was more impactful during an F5 hurricane in the state of Alabama, Nick Saban and his players, or the governmental officials of Alabama. So what I would say about Nick is an incredible understanding of where he's good and where he can get better. And he supplements all the areas. He's not afraid to reach out to tons of different people, tons of speakers, a lot smarter than me, whether they're in substance abuse, motivation, education, inspiration, business. And then a handful of those people get a chance to consult on a more frequent basis for me, which was 25 to 30 days a year, and then play a deeper role weekly with him. So his understanding of, you don't need to be sick to get better. Yeah, I'm really good. And he's got a great system. And he's so good at what makes football players good, coaches good, how he recruits, his architecture. It's not a BS positive message. So he's going to give a talk for 10 minutes. He prepares for 2 hours, because he learned when he met one of the presidents of the United States that he saw that level of preparation with the president of the United States and said, why should it be any different for a coach? Now, I think Mike Trout. So for me, my relationship was with Billy Epler and the coaches. I got to consult, 30, 40 days with the team and spend, probably a lot more time with some than with others. But I got to spend a lot of time watching Mike Trout, and because Mike Trout is, you talk about great to greater. Yep. So, Mike Trout, and so what I saw in Mike was the humility was incredible. The athleticism was obviously exceptional, and incredible. The grit and grind, he was making $30 million a year and still going home and living with his family. How he managed adversity, his adversity tolerance, when they, and I'm sure he handled it well with Tyler Skaggs last year. For those down in Orange County, and I love Tyler and his family. But I think Mike has an incredible process, and he trusts. What I saw was he trusts his process. He's not looking for gimmicks. One of the things that pisses me off the most is when somebody says, I read your book, what can I read next? Just fucking follow the book. I hate serial readers. I think where Mike is he has a really good process. He trusts it. Doesn't vary, but he's open-minded and he'll listen, but he's not looking for gimmicks.
Okay.
You know, and you know, in baseball, it's not about getting rid of the slump. It's happening. It's how you minimize the length of it.
Yep.
That's the difference.
Yep.
You know, you minimize yours to four games versus 14 games.
Yeah.
Because 4 games, like, they can ride through with you. 14 games, man, they got to get something done.
Yeah.
So, and then I would say Russell's just the most incredible collection of world-class behaviors. He just does everything, like, you know, how he talks out loud. If you're negative, you can't live in his life. Like there's no room for you. You know, like there's no negative news on TV. You know, they'll watch Netflix, they'll watch other things, listens to uplifting spiritual music. Yeah, he's not afraid of rap. He's not going to plug his ears or whatever. But the time he gets up, the nutritionist, his active release therapist, his massage therapist, his understanding of his body's physiology, and you know, understanding of sleep hygiene and fatigue science. He has a great understanding of how that works for him. And then if you listen to Russell talk, if you go on the podcast we did with Zillow or some of the other things that we've done, this guy knows more than me, you know, because he lives it. He understands neutral thinking, the minimization of negativity. And that's what got him through an interception at the 1 yard line with 124 million people watching, which was 11 million people more than that watched MASH's finale. For you young people, you may not know, but that was the most popular show. That 124 million people that watched him throw an interception was the most televised event in the history of our country.
Wow.
And he made that mistake, and we got through it neutrally. It was real. Evaluated what happened, what was the decision, feet placement, arm throw, all the different things, routes. This is real. And then we went down to Rancho Santa Fe. The book goes into this in depth about how we navigated it. We got what was in our control, a great off season. You know, that was all we could control. We got a really good trainer. We had a great off season, did all the things that you need to do, followed his goals, which was to run at the 4.4 level. He had run in the low 4.5s. That was an aspirational goal. We shot for that. We built everything around speed, so he wasn't getting caught from the back end. And then every morning we watched one of his fourth quarters going all the way back to his 9th grade year while he'd have breakfast. If you want to stay where you're at, stay. Mm-hmm. Like, it's okay. Like, this is why I aspire to spend my time with people who are already really good. We need to be neutral in our language. We need to be radical in our candor with ourselves.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and I'm grateful that it is. I got to tell you, you know, I get asked all the time, what's the one thing that most of the guests that have been on this show have in common? I can tell you, they're all from different backgrounds. Some of them are tall, some of them are short, some of them are from the U.S., some of them are from abroad, different ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, you name it. But I got to tell you, most of them been to therapy, and I'm a big believer in therapy. I think that whether you've got some real trauma you got to work through in your life, or, you know, you just got a problem you want to work on right now, maybe you just want to talk out loud about some issues you got or find a better quality of emotions. Big believer in therapy, and I love BetterHelp. I love BetterHelp because, number one, it's done online. Number two, if you get a therapist, you don't vibe with them, you can switch at any given time that you want to. It's a wonderful way to go to therapy, and I really believe it can help you if you have things that you want help with. So decide today you're going to give BetterHelp a shot and stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/edshow today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/edshow. So, you know, there's a lot of people out there right now learning about the benefits of fasting, like weight loss, obviously the mental and physical performance and gut health, but worry about the whole, you know, not eating part. Well, that's exactly why Prolon was created. The good thing about it is Prolon is not a diet. It's actually science. It's science based on internationally recognized discoveries in medicine. And it all starts with Prolon's 5-day program. You get snacks, soups, and beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. But unlike anything you've ever experienced before, your body believes it's fasting and conducts itself as if it were fasting. Right now, Prolon is offering the Ed Mylett Show listeners 15% off their 5-day nutrition program. So go to prolonlife.com/Mylett. So that's Prolon, PROLON, life.com/Mylett for this special offer. That's prolonlife.com/Mylett. These statements and products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases or condition.
In the book, something that just stuck out to me was that, you know, that God created the universe out of darkness. And a lot of times people end up showing in a dark time, in the evening. You talk about Genesis.
Yeah.
I never thought about it this way, and I'd like you to speak to this. So, there's a lot of people that are listening today that are in a dark time in their life.
Yeah.
It seems bleak. People have let them down or hurt them, or their finances aren't very good, or they just feel lost and they can't see the light in their life. They don't see the vision in their life. And you said something so profound in the book about that God didn't create the universe, create the world in the daytime. He actually created it in the dark, in the evening. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah,
this is awesome.
It's a great principle because we all go through these dark seasons, and it's easy to get discouraged and bitter and give up on our dreams and give up on life. But I just like to think about, the dark times. God's still in control. And I think the point in the book is I call it victory begins in the dark.
Yes.
So anyway, the day, you think about it, a new day starts at 12 o'clock midnight. But it's dark. Why wouldn't a new day start at 7 a.m. when the light starts to come up? Right. But the way God does things many times is He'll start in the dark, and you think, it's not a new day, Joel. It's 1 a.m. It's dark in my life. I've got this medical issue, or I've got problems with my children, or I can't talk about accomplishing my dream. I don't have the funds. Well, it may be dark right now, but you have to believe that sunrise is coming, that God is still working. I think about even that analogy of you take a seed and, if it stays on the shelf, it's not going to do any good. But that seed has to go through a dark time. It gets planted. It's under, it gets buried. It's in the ground. It's dark. It's uncomfortable. People may be walking on it, but you know what? God created the only way for that seed to germinate is to go through a dark season. So I like this thought about you're not buried, you're planted. You're about to come up. You're going to blossom. Great things come out of the dark. And so I think that's when you have to hold on to your faith and say, God, I may not understand this. It may not be fair. These people didn't do me right, or I had this setback. But when you believe that God is still in control, that He's still directing your steps, that out of that dark season, you're going to come into a light season. You're going to come into a time where you bloom and blossom. But I think the key is we can't get bitter in the dark. We can't give up in the dark. And I know we have seasons where you think, we may go through a season of, a little bit of discouragement, but I believe you can get out of that, and you can, have that faith to say, God, I believe that victory begins in the dark, and it may be midnight in my life, but it is a new day, and then I'm going to come into these bright seasons.
I hope people don't forget that. It's one of the things out of the book. By the way, you can tell I really loved the book. I really did. And in the book, you even talk about seeds. I'll give a little bit of it away because I want everybody to read it. But you actually, not only about that seed being planted, but you talk about the apple seed and how one apple seed can actually grow into an entire orchard, except it's got to get what on it first?
It's got to get dirt on it.
Yeah, it's got to get dirty. It's going to have a mess first, right?
Yeah,
and that's the difference.
I think those dirty seasons, those messy seasons is somewhere, what I get, Ed, is, where was God when this happened? But you know what? Everybody in the Scripture went through difficulties, most everybody, before they came into their prime, before they saw God's favor in great ways. I talk a lot about Joseph just in the book and in general, but think about his life, Ed. He was betrayed by his family. So his brothers were jealous. They sold him as a slave, 17 years old. For 13 years or something, 12 years or so, he was working in slavery, in another country, against his will, didn't speak the language, all these negative things. But one day he interpreted a dream for the Pharaoh and was made put in charge of the nation of Egypt. And so I think about Joseph, all those 13 years, would I have been that positive? Would I have done the right thing when the wrong thing was happening? Yet all those disappointments, his brothers betraying him, being put in prison falsely accused, all these disappointments were leading him to the destiny that God had. And I think that's sometimes what takes real faith to say, okay, wait a minute, God, I don't want to go through this setback. I don't want to go through the pandemic, or this person walked out of my life, or this business didn't make it. How do you know you're not a Joseph, that's not leading you to your greatest days that are coming? Wow.
Have you ever doubted your faith?
I have not really. I'm not a big doubter, and I don't mean to sound super holy, but it's not. I haven't really doubted. I've had difficult times. My mom's going through cancer, and we all have difficult times. So I'm not that type that doubt. I turn to my faith. I think, God, you know what? This doesn't seem fair, or this is tough, or I don't understand it, but I turn to it to draw strength from my faith. To me, that's where I get strength. I can be, you can wake up some mornings and just feel like the weight of the world's on you. But if I can have a little time to just say, God, I thank you that I'm alive and I'm healthy and you brought me through in the past, and I remember the victories in the past. And I think you hadn't brought me this far to leave me. And that builds my faith back up. And I haven't really gone to a doubting place.
I assumed you would say that, but I wanted to ask you just to see how you said it. Can I ask you a question? I've heard you say this many times. Maybe I'm getting personal, maybe I'm not, but you'll say, hey, God, and then you'll say something. When you pray, I'm just curious, do you pray out loud like that, or are you having these conversations in your mind and your heart? I know how I do it, but I'm just curious how you do it.
I do both. I start the morning off. I try to start the morning off, it's not every morning, but that I will pray out loud, just this loud. I don't pray super loud, but but during the day, a lot of times I'll just talk to God in my thoughts. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's a scripture that talks about, says pray without ceasing, or like pray all the time. We can't pray all the time. You got to work. You got to do this. But I think in your thoughts, you can have a conversation with God. I think back to that, people not being raised like me, prayer is just talking to God like you'd talk to a friend. And I think sometimes I have a lot of the people in our church back home in Houston, half of them came out of a Catholic background or are still Catholic. And there's a lot of, formalities there. And I think, and sometimes even the way some people raised, it's, holy God, and it's a language that we don't talk into that.
Right.
But I think you talk to God like you talk to your friend. You know what? Before I walked in here, Lord, give me the words to speak today. Help me. Before I work out, Lord, help me get a good workout. Give me a safe trip home tomorrow. I'm just talking to God in my thoughts. I really believe God will be as close to you as you want him to be. He's a friend. He's not going to come, knock you over most of the time, but you can talk to God all through the day. And you can draw strength from him and know that he cares. But I do pray in the morning. I do pray out loud. Just that's the way I like to do it. But a lot of my prayer is thanking God. There's things I ask for, but I ask for wisdom and all, and certain things. But a lot of times I just thank God. Thank you for your blessings. Thank you for bringing the right people into my life. I like to thank God in advance. In other words, I think there's sometimes. We come, I talk to people, I'm begging God to heal me from this cancer, and I'm begging God to send me somebody. And I know what they mean. They're earnest, but I don't think you have to beg God. You ask God, Lord, I thank you for healing me from this sickness, or God, opening up a new door. God, bring me a great spouse, whatever it is. And then I just like to, Lord, thank you that you're working. Thank you that you're bringing me a spouse. Thank you that you're healing me. So I think that grateful attitude, is a healthy attitude.
Yeah, I think there's a level of, I feel it in your spirit that you're a grateful man, and I think that spreads. I think it's infectious. I also think that thanking God in advance, that there's a level of expectations in our lives that the world is going to reveal to us, and if we have an expectation that God's going to deliver to us abundance and increase and have us rise and give us peace and deliver the right people in that right conversation, that we're going to see it when it shows up, don't you?
I do, Ed. It's exactly right. You are very good at making this message very broad. But what you're saying in growing up in church, if I can bring it that language, is God's going to meet you at the level of your expectations. And I think sometimes we don't have any expectation. Let's just get through the pandemic, and let me just try to raise these kids. And I think we get up and we draw in negativity. But I think God meets you there when you get up and say, Lord, I thank you for abundance. I thank you for, health. I thank you for whatever your dreams are. You get that vision and you get that down in you, and when you're expecting it, it's really, you're releasing your faith. In other words, you're saying, God, I believe you're big enough to make this happen in my life. And I can go back to the scripture. You know all this too, and probably people listening too. But, there's a lady in the scripture that's been sick for 12 years, and she saw Jesus was passing through, and she reached out through the crowd and she just touched him. But she had a faith that when she touched him, she would be well. And you know what, Ed, there were hundreds of people around Jesus that day. I'm sure people were bumping into him. It was crowded. Yet he stopped and said, who touched me? I don't know that everybody else got healed or they all got their miracle, but when you release your faith, when she had an expectancy that, hey, if I can just get to him, I know something's going to happen. I know I'm going to get well. Well, I think if we live with that expectancy of, Lord, thank you, it's another great day that you're opening doors that I can't open. You're taking me where I can't go on my own, giving me wisdom, helping me to be a blessing, just an expectancy to, like you're saying, to be a force for good and to see dreams come to pass.
I love that. I'm so grateful we're doing this, by the way. Thank you for this. For me personally, but also I just know millions of people are being affected by it. It just warms my heart to know it. But you're also a dude. And so I love this story in the book because almost identical thing happened to me. And I love this because it's about the enemy underestimating us. So you're about 10 years old.
Yeah.
You're playing in a little league game. And I was a little dude too. I know you love baseball. I played college baseball. We both share that in common. Phil's telling me about how when you gave your big talk, I think it was at Yankee Stadium, you set the podium up over second base. So I do know you love baseball.
Yeah.
But I think it was one of those stadiums anyway. But so anyway, I want you to tell them this story because I think it's so powerful. In the book, you talk about how you come up to bat and what do the coaches do? But I love your response because you're still a dude, right? And this is important.
That's it. Yeah, it's funny, Ed, because we're not 6'5".
Right,
We're
exactly.
both good sizes, but I was always very, very small growing up, height-wise. And so I'm in like little league, like 10 or 11 years old, and I come up to bat, and I was a good player. I played second base, but I was just so small. So I come up to bat at a little league game. You got all the parents on both sides, and as a kid, you're still trying to figure out who you are to begin with. So the coach from the other team comes out of the dugout when I come up to bat, and he starts waving and hollering to his outfield saying, come in, come in, come in. And he's just way, way too dramatic. He could have done it a lot more subtly. And, he's basically saying, come in, this loser's up to bat. And then, you know what? I just thought, this guy does not know what's in me. He does not know what I can do. He didn't breathe life into me. He didn't equip me. And just something rose up at 10 years old. And that guy, the pitcher threw the pitch, and I swung as hard as I could. It went over everybody's head.
Love it.
One bounce hit the fence. I had an inside the park home run. I was always very fast. But the funny thing, that the point of the story, not just to brag on that, but the point of the story is the next time I came up to bat, I promise you that coach came up with the same enthusiasm and started shouting, back up, back up, back up. And I believe that's what happens to us many times in life, that, hey, listen, don't let somebody else label you or tell you what you can't do, or, make you feel like you're at a disadvantage, or you didn't get it. You're not strong enough, big enough, talented enough, good looking enough. You don't have a great personality. Listen, they're underestimating you. You got to go out and, hit the ball out. You got to go out and use your gifts, and you let that boldness, that confidence rise up in you, because people don't determine your destiny. God does. And so I believe that you step up with courage and with confidence, and, you'll see those same people that put you down. They'll be the ones saying, well, look out, look what they're going to do.
I love it. I hope those of you that are listening to this that may not even be people of faith are just starting to feel something stir within you, that you're capable of more. And that, maybe you'll begin to consider what Joel and I are speaking about today, but at a minimum that you begin to feel something stirring in you. And for all of you that listen to this, there's a reason why you've always had that question on your heart. It's a reason why your soul's always tugged at you, is, what's the truth about this? Why is that the main question you've always had all your life? You ought to consider why you keep asking yourself that question. And I hope maybe today's given you some of those answers.
Let's talk first of all about getting laser focused. And I mean this as your friend. I mean this talking to myself too. I always cover things that make me better, things that I struggle with. But I got to tell you, I think there's a different level for you. I think there's a different level for you to get obsessed, crazy laser focus. I say all the time, our obsessions become our possessions. But we won't possess them if we're not truly obsessed. I bet there's been a person in your life you've been obsessed with. If you're over 20 years old, listen to this, more than likely you've had somebody you were pretty obsessed with, haven't you? That you wanted in your life, you wanted to date, you wanted as a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a significant other. How many times a day did you think about them? How many times a day did they distract you from what you were doing with just the thought of them? In other words, this is what I want you to understand. When you're laser obsessed focused, your obsession distracts you from what you're currently doing, not the other way around. You're not really obsessed with it if you're easily distracted from it. This is so important. You right now can test whether it's your obsession with whether it distracts you constantly. The first thing you think of when you wake up, last thing before you go to bed. When you have a big laugh, it comes up. When you cry, it comes up. When you're watching TV, it comes up. When you're doing your regular job, but it's your side hustle, it comes up. You can't stop thinking about it. It distracts you from the rest of your life. That's what an obsession does. When it's not really your obsession, the rest of your life distracts you from it. And so the it in your life is so important. But there's all these things that distract us today. I'm going to give you a recommendation. Turn your damn TV off. Turn the radio off most of the time. Turn your phone off a lot too. So here's the deal. The TV's competing constantly to distract you with stuff that really doesn't matter. And I'm not saying, by the way, don't be informed, don't know what's going on in the world, because that makes you more interesting, right? You should know what's going on in the world. But let's be real. Does it really matter what's going on with the Kardashians right now? Does it really matter? They live on my street in one of my neighborhoods, right? And they're very nice people, but I got to be honest with you. What happens in their life doesn't dramatically impact mine, but how many people are more obsessed with the Kardashians? And I can say this as good friends. We have many good friends in reality television. They're even listening to this right now, and they would tell you this. Don't be so obsessed with them. Be obsessed with your own reality TV program called Your Own Life, right? How about the news? All the time they're trying to distract us. Before it was Obama, now it's Trump. Trump's going crazy today. Obama was nuts about this. Healthcare, Iraq, Iran, North Korea, right? Like all these things. And most of these things don't impact our own lives. I'm not saying don't know about them, but it's such a convenient escape from the work. It's such a convenient escape from our obsessions. The left against the right, Republicans against Democrats. Who's going to be the next president? Who's going to get the Democratic nomination? Can they beat Trump, right? Who cares? Who cares right now? You got to win in your own life. It's like, when I say this, people say, well, that's not, a very professional, evolved opinion. I'm just telling you what it takes to win. What it takes to win is not worrying about all that stuff. That should be the background noise. But talking about it, thinking about it, watching TV about it. Who cares what's going on in the real whatevers of anywhere? Who cares what the Kardashians are doing? Who cares who's running for office now? You say, well, wait a minute. Aren't you socially conscious? Here's all I know. I've been alive through many different presidents, Republican and Democrat. None of them changed my life. None of them did. And none of them are going to change your life if we're being real. People ask me all the time, why don't you run for office? Because I think entrepreneurs change the world. I think grassroots movements of good people and communities change the world. I don't think politicians change the world. And I don't mean that negatively. I coach many of them. I've coached several of them. I want there to be good ones. I want them to make good decisions. But I don't obsess about it because it doesn't dramatically impact my own life. In fact, if you think about it, the majority of people obsessed with politics I'm just mean this nicely, they don't have much going on in their own life. So it's a convenient distraction to be mad at a politician because you're losing. It's a convenient distraction to get caught up in some issue outside of yourself so you don't have to focus on your own life. If you can spend enough time obsessing about what these politicians or reality stars do, no one will look at you. But eventually in your life, you're faced with you. Eventually in your life, it's you. Eventually it's your life. Eventually they won't be on TV. Eventually it'll all be gone. Remember how obsessed you were with President Obama, whether you loved him or hated him? He's gone now. It's a new guy. And in either 2 more years or 6 more years, it'll be a new woman, hopefully, right? So getting obsessed with these things doesn't matter. Men, so many of you obsessed with sports. You're fans of these teams. Did it really change your life when the Patriots won the Super Bowl? Like, if you're a Patriot fan, on Saturday they hadn't yet won. On Sunday night they won. How different was your life? Tom Brady's life was different. Yours wasn't. You Laker fans or basketball fans, does it really matter? Like, if your team wins, does it really matter? I got news for you guys. You don't play for the team. You don't. I know you think you do. I know you wear their jerseys. I think it's one of the funniest things in life, and I don't mean this critically. Please, I mean this as a brother, guys. But you running around wearing a jersey with an other grown man's name on the back of it. Isn't that a little bit ridiculous? I mean, some of you ladies are nodding right now. My husband needs to hear this. Hey, dude, I don't mean this critically, but really, a grown-ass man, you're wearing the name of another man on the back of your jersey every single day. Literally, your name isn't Bryant or James or Trout or Brady, but you wear their name on the back of you? Isn't that a little bit odd? We won Sunday. No, we didn't win. They won. You got to go back to work on Monday. You don't play for that team. And it's time you wake up and start getting focused on your own life. I'm not saying don't watch the game, but being obsessed with it throughout the week. Who's injured? Who's hurt? Are we going to win? We aren't doing anything because you don't play for them. In fact, players trade teams so much. What you really are rooting for is like laundry. You root for the team that has like this jersey that's your color, but the players change all the time. Yet you keep rooting for these teams. What a catastrophic, and I mean this as love, because I'm a sports fan. I love the Red Sox, the Patriots. I'm a New England area sports fan. But I don't really get real caught up in it. I go to enjoy the game once in a while and how great they are as athletes, but what a catastrophic waste of your own life to be worrying about what professional athletes do and pretending to be on their team. You're not on the team. You don't win or lose. They do. Right? They do. So wake up and get focused on your own goals. I can hear all the women going, amen, tell him, preach, right? Ladies, in your cases, it might be your sports team. It might be your politics. It might be the television star. It might be some author you love. It might be something like that for men or women. For women, some of you, it's sports as well. But the fact of the matter is, all of these things are a distraction from our own lives. You don't play for these teams. You're not on these shows, and you don't know these people. And whoever wins a Grammy or an Oscar doesn't change your life. You winning in your life is what changes it. So tune out the distractions. Will you please? Turn your TV off. Get focused in your own life. Invest those hours on podcasts like this that actually impact your life. Invest it on someone's social media like mine who's actually putting out messages about your life. And by the way, I say this as somebody who has many of these people on my show. Many of these people that you admire are friends of mine, as many of you know. There are things to learn from them. Absolutely, they're at the top of their craft. But I'm not deluded into thinking a top NBA player is any better a person than a top school teacher or a top nurse. I don't think a top politician is a superior human being over a top landscaper or a top banker or a top entrepreneur. I think the people at the top of everything, there's things to learn from. And guess what the people at the top of everything have in common? They're obsessed on their own lives, not other people's. Those athletes you admire didn't get there by worrying about your life, did they? And so tune out the distractions in our lives. Turn the TV off. Get some perspective. Get obsessed. Because we do it because it's an escape, because we don't have to look at ourselves. I'm challenging you to look at yourself. Even in the podcast space, narrow it down to the 3, 4, or 5 of us that make the biggest difference for you. And then when you're done listening to us, go to work and execute, right? You can get overtrained. You can listen to too many different shows. I happen to think you should be listening to mine because I think it's the best content. But pick a few, right? Don't be listening to 40 of them because there's time that you could be executing in your life. If you listen to it in the car, at the gym, listen to as many as you want. But off of those times, pick 3 or 4 and the rest of the time be executing on your dream. So what I'm telling you is CNN, ESPN, Fox News, right? The E channel. I have friends on all those channels. They're out to take you from your dreams. They're part of the enemy of stealing your dreams because they just, not consciously, but they take your time. They divert your focus. Can you get obsessed on one thing? What other things divert our focus? The things in life that don't matter, our own negative thoughts, our own insecurities, our own weaknesses, these distract us. Failure distracts us. Gossiping of other people distracts us. Talking about other people, worrying about haters, getting caught up in things that don't matter in our life. Drugs and alcohol distract us. There's all these things. When you start to pile them into life, what's your distraction? Just be honest. Is it living vicariously through your children? Is it living through them and their soccer team and their little league and their grades? Are you distracted by living through your children? Are you distracted by ESPN? Are you distracted by movies, Netflix, video games, gossip, haters, Fox News, CNN, right? Your problems. Are you distracted with things that don't matter in your life? There's all these things competing to get you to not be focused. How about your insecurities? How about your fears? How about your worries or your problems? Are you using all of these? Do you your relationship issues, does it distract you from your big goals? Do you let these things, do you almost willingly do it? Here's what I think. Most of us are willing participants in our own distraction. And we need to be willing participants in our own focus, in our own obsessions, and getting ourselves back on plan. Because remember what I told you. If you're really obsessed, the obsession will distract you from these things. But if you're not obsessed, these things will distract you from that thing. And this requires self-auditing on your part. And so that's the part 1 that I think steals more dreams than almost anything in life right now, is this obsession with distraction. It's the obsession with other people think about us. It's all of these things competing except the one thing that matters, the one thing. But the best of the best, listen to me, the one thing dominates their life. The reason some of the athletes I work with have a hard time when they retire, can I be honest with you? Because they were so great at what they did because they were so obsessed on that one thing. When that one thing is gone, they don't know what to do with themselves with all these distractions now. Because the best in everything don't live with distraction, they live with obsession and focus. I'm not saying don't be a complete person.
But I'm saying for you to complete your journey towards maxing out, for you to completely max out your life, you must eliminate all of these things that take you by the wayside. And so now the second part of the coin, if we're going to win, right, is the sacrifice. I want you to write this down. I need to embrace the suffering. You know, there's something powerful that once you just sort of embrace the fact that in order to achieve something big, you've got to get rid of these distractions. And then the other layer of it is you're probably going to have some suffering to get there, or some sacrifice to get there. And so once you've embraced and decided that this suffering, this sacrifice you're making is an indicator of progress. It's an indicator of obsession. Suffering and sacrifice and hard work is an indication of progress towards our dreams. The lack of sacrifice, the lack of suffering in our lives, its removal, its non-existence also equates to a non-existence of a great life, a non-existence of a dream happening, a big one anyway. And so embrace the fact that you're going to have to sacrifice and suffer to some extent. Once you've embraced that it's going to happen, it's almost not that bad. It's kind of like those of you that are fit. We already know, and you already know even if you're not, you've sort of accepted that before you go to the gym and get there, you're going to have to suffer. And we go anyway. It becomes a habit. No one goes into a gym thinking, I'm not going to have to sacrifice or suffer. There'll be no discomfort or no pain. But millions of people go anyway, don't they, to the gym? On some level, they're suffering in the gym, whether it's breathing heavy or sweating or aches or pains or stress. You know, everything in the gym is a sacrifice, and to some extent, you're suffering, going through some pain. You know it before you go, don't you? Yet most of us go all the time. Yet in life, outside of that one area, most of us are worried about suffering. We're afraid of it. When we're suffering and sacrificing, we wonder whether it's worth it. We wonder whether we're supposed to. We wonder whether sacrifice or setbacks or suffering is a sign it's not our real dream, don't we? See, at the gym, you'd never think, oh, I'm going through some pain and discomfort. This must be a sign I shouldn't be at the gym. You'd never think that. It goes with the territory. Everyone knows this. Build a bicep or a tricep or a chest or legs. You have to break it down, suffer and sacrifice for it to grow. So while it's happening, there's no part of you that says this isn't right. In fact, the indication of the pain and sacrifice and sweat, don't you feel better at the gym? You're like, wow, I really sacrificed today. I really suffered. So in that area, we all know to the extent we suffer and sacrifice is to the extent we grow. And your body is a metaphor for the rest of your life. But the rest of our life, every time we sweat, every time we sacrifice, every time we suffer, we don't do what we do at the gym. We start saying, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this. Maybe I'm not cut out. Maybe it's not my destiny. Maybe I just can't do it. It's the most unbelievable, ridiculous conclusion we draw, but it's what everybody does, which is another form of distraction, is doubt. The coins flip on each other all the time, don't they? Another form of distraction is just doubt. And doubt comes from the suffer. It comes from a loss. It comes from fear. It comes from the sacrifice. And so just remember this. You're supposed to suffer and sacrifice. So let me ask you a question. What are you willing to risk in order to make your dream come true? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. You're going to take a risk. Maybe it's financial. Maybe it's a risk of time. Maybe it's a risk at your job. Maybe it's a risk of looking bad. Maybe it's a risk of failing, of falling on your face, of going broke, of going through pain, of going through anxiety. Maybe it's even a risk in a relationship that's just going to be difficult while you do this. What are you willing to risk in order to win? And you have to accept that, because remember what I'm going to tell you. The price you will pay for not making your dream come true is far greater than the one that you will pay to make it come true. Want me to say it again? The price you will pay, the suffering you will go through to make your dream come true is incredibly small, infinitely smaller than the price you will pay if you never do. You'll pay that one the rest of your life. And so ask yourself what you're willing to risk. What's the price you're willing to pay? Because what most people do when they're trying to chase their dream or their big outcome, the whole time they're negotiating the price in their head. They're negotiating it. Should I continue to do it? Is it worth it? I don't know if I can continue anymore. It's getting higher, and that price is failure. That price is setback. That price is looking back. That price can be financial, literally a physical price. And what happens is, if you don't negotiate that price in advance, it's going to steal your focus and energy and become another distraction. One of the great distractions of chasing our dreams is this thing that goes off in our head as we're negotiating the price we're paying. Should I keep paying it? Is it getting too high? Is it too much? And you'll have people in your ear, it's too big a sacrifice. You're going through too much. And you begin to negotiate it in your mind. It distracts all your focus. You can't be executing and negotiating simultaneously. If you're in your head negotiating and negotiating and negotiating, you can't execute. So negotiate it now. Negotiate it with me now. What are you willing to pay? For me, when I'm after something big, as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral, I'll sacrifice everything else. But I will not sacrifice anything legal, anything unethical, or anything immoral. But beyond that, I'm going to get it. And I know that negotiation comes up front. I accept the suffering. I accept the sacrifice. I know the sacrifice is far smaller than the one I'll pay if I don't do it. And I eliminate distractions and I go freaking get what I want in my life, just like you can. And this needs to be your recipe as well. If you're one of these people who's still negotiating whether it's worth it, and maybe you've got someone in your head making you question it, that is a poverty and scarcity mentality. Let me prove it to you. When I didn't have money, and I spent most of my life with none, just like you, what do we do when we go into a store? We don't go get what we want. We go get what we think we can afford. And so I spent the majority of my life flipping price tags over. I didn't buy the shirt I wanted. I bought the one that I could afford. I bought things based on price, not worth. And so I'm sure you do. I didn't buy the car I wanted. I bought the car I could afford. So when I was broke and I had scarcity, what do you do when you're in that position? You negotiate price. You flip price tags. What's it cost? What's it cost? What's it cost? What's it cost? Not what do you want.
When I was poor, everywhere I went, flip the price tag. What's it cost? What's it cost? What's it cost? What's it cost? I was constantly negotiating the price for everything in my life. You do that when you come from a place of scarcity, of being poor. Successful people and wealthy people have a subtle distinction. They don't look at price, they look at worth. Is this worth it? If you're constantly looking at the price tag, you'll eventually relent. You'll eventually give in. Stop negotiating the price. It's a freeing experience to totally commit. When you totally commit to a relationship, to a business, to your fitness, to your faith, it's a freeing, powerful, it's almost like removing kryptonite from your life when you totally commit. Can you do that? The people around you always say, it's costing too much. It's costing too much. And you go, maybe it's costing too much. You gotta start going, no, it's worth it. It's not the price, it's the worth. It's a subtle distinction in your life.
That same scarcity mentality we do in going after our dreams. We want to acquire our dream. You can't be in price tag mode. What's it cost? What's it cost? What's it cost? You never get what you want. Decide in advance what it's going to cost, and then decide. Here's the subtle distinction. Successful people don't negotiate the cost of something. They negotiate whether it's worth it. That's subtle. It's very subtle. If you're a person who's always thinking about what it's costing you in the sacrifice towards your dream, you're always going to be negotiating it. But if you can decide in advance that the cost is worth it, the negotiation stops and you go execute. What I'm telling you is if you really want something bad enough, it's worth it. It's worth it. So start to feed yourself the worth question over and over and over again, not the cost question. Cost is a distraction. Worth is a focus mechanism. This is so worth it. It's so worth it. It's so worth it. Focuses you. Cost distracts you. What I want to remind you of is on the other side of that suffering, on the other side of that sacrifice, on the other side of that laser focus is your dream. It's one of the greatest places you'll ever be in your life. And here's what I know, by the way. The times where you've been the most laser focused in your life, listen to me on this. You've been the most happy. The times you've been the most distracted, you've been the most unhappy. Ladies, if you're listening to this, you think about the times where maybe when you were pregnant, for example, if you've been pregnant before, and the amount of focus that went in on that beautiful baby you were going to have. The preparation for it. I mean, you're carrying that child right next to you. You can't get more focused on something than something you're carrying, right? And I'll guarantee you during labor, you weren't thinking about your you were thinking about your electric bill or some email you had to return. You were damn focused in that moment. And I'll bet that baby made you almost happier than you ever been in your life. For some of you that when you were cramming for finals in your life, right? That first time you were cramming and it was so laser focused on something, and you were happy. You know, the truth is that was a happy time in your life. For some of you that have built some businesses or maybe when you were in your courtship dating who you're now married to, you were so focused, weren't you, during that time with that person? I mean, they were some of the happiest times of your life. The most focused times in our life, the less distracted times in our life, also equals the happiest times in our life. So if you really want true bliss, you want true fulfillment, it comes from eliminating the distractions and becoming obsessed. There are healthy obsessions in life.
And the more obsessed we are about healthy things, the happier we are. Whether we're obsessed with the happy times of carrying that baby and having that baby, the happy times of achieving a degree we've had in life, the obsession we've had when we were dating somebody and we were so in love with them. These times when we're in the healthiest of our obsessions is when we're the happiest. So I want to challenge you today to make that shift of eliminating these distractions and elevating your level of focus in your life. And remember this, there's 3 things that I want you to be controlling: your state, your story, and your strategy. State, story, strategy. What's your state? Are you in a state of focus? Are you pumped up? Are you breathing deeply? Are you lasered in on something? Are you completely in there? Or is your state a distracted, diverted state? Right? Hunched over, watching TV, looking at your phone, worrying about Iraq, worrying about North Korea, worrying about Trump, worrying about Obama, worrying about an election, worrying about who's in a fight on a reality show, right? All of that stuff distracts us. Or are you in a state totally pumped up, totally focused on your dreams, lasered in? Number 2, what's the story you're telling yourself? Are you telling yourself the sacrifice is worth it, the suffering is worth it, that the price you're going to pay is worth it, and that you're going to get on the other side and great things are going to happen and your obsessions become your possessions, and this is the happiest you've ever been before, and your life matters, and you're not some fan of some team, you're a fan of your own life, that when we win, we really win. When you win the game of your own life, you really win. Not when the Patriots or Lakers win, but when I win, and you're telling yourself that story. Or are you telling yourself the other story? Hey man, I hope we get our quarterback on Sunday. I hope LeBron can drop 25, And you tell this distracted story that's completely meaningless in your own life about some sports team, right? Which story are you telling yourself? The one of your own life or hiding in the story of other people's lives? Let me say that to you again. Are you telling the story of your own life? Or are you hiding in the story of other people's lives? We hide in the story of other people's lives through gossip of people that are around us, talking bad about them. We hide in reality TV, we hide in the news, we hide in politicians, and we hide pretending we play for these sports teams. Those are all stories about other people's lives. Are you in the story of your own life? And then lastly, what's your strategy? You got to execute on your strategy. You have a very detailed plan to make that story you're telling a reality, and everything transforms in your life.